Pardon? Un autre 10 minutes? OK. 10 minutes? Another 10 minutes. OK, pour Noël, je vais partager ce que j'ai. La séquence est dans la liste. Parfait. Je vais dire ça à Virginie. C'est comme une base. Parfait.
face the ongoing threat of the global pandemic. Over the last few months, we've learned that we can never let our guard down. The fight against COVID-19 is far from over, so we must stay focused on the task ahead. We need to rebuild our economy while keeping Canadians safe. These two goals are not mutually exclusive. They go together. Healthier Canadians will mean, and have already meant, a healthier and stronger economy. And on that front, today, we took yet another step forward. Through the Safe Restart Agreement, reached earlier this summer, we announced federal funding to help provinces and territories safely restart the economy. Provinces and territories were asked to outline in a letter just how these funds would be best allocated within their jurisdictions based on their priorities. The premiers have now submitted those letters, which will allow over $19 billion in federal funding to flow towards our shared work to protect Canadians as we safely restart the economy. Kids are now going back to school, and as a dad, I get how parents are worried. Last month, we announced the Safe Return to Class Fund to help protect kids and staff with an extra $2 billion for the provinces. Keeping our kids safe must always be our top priority. Plus tôt cet été, nous avions
Earlier
demandé
this
aux
summer,
provinces ou
we asked the
territoires de nous
provinces and
soumettre une
territories
lettre
to submit a
indiquant
letter
comment ils comptaient se
outlining
servir
how they
des
intended
fonds
to
du cadre
use
de
the
relance
funding
sécuritaire
under the
en se
Safe
basant
Restart
sur
Agreement
leurs priorités.
based on their own
Tous les premiers
priorities.
ministres ont maintenant
All the
envoyé
premiers
leur
have now
lettre.
submitted their
Cet
letter.
investissement fédéral de
That
plus de
federal
19
investment of more than
milliards de
$19 billion
aidera donc à
will
protéger les
therefore
Canadiens
help
pour
them to
continuer
protect
de rouvrir
Canadians
l'économie
so that we can
de
continue
manière
to reopen the
sécuritaire.
economy safely.
Le nombre de cas
The number of
augmente un peu
cases
partout au
is
pays
going
et
up
dans le
right
monde,
across the country and
pendant que
around
les
the
enfants
globe.
retournent à l'école.
And children are going
Je veux
back
donc
to
demander aux
school.
Canadiens de
So I'm going to
continuer à
ask
faire attention
Canadians to
et de
continue to be
suivre les
careful and to
recommandations de la
follow
santé publique.
public health
Limitez
guidelines.
vos interactions en
Limit your
personne.
interactions,
Prenez les précautions
take the
nécessaires pour
necessary
réduire les
precautions
risques
to
d'exposition
reduce the
afin
risk
que
of
vous et votre
exposure
famille
so
puissiez
that
rester en
you and your
sécurité
family can
et
remain
télécharger
safe,
l'application
and do
du
download the
gouvernement pour vous
application
protéger
to
et
protect
protéger
you
vos amis et
and
voisins.
protect your friends and neighbors.
Chaque effort
Every
compte.
effort counts.
Lors des derniers jours,
In
la
recent
retraite
days,
du Conseil des ministres a
the
été très chargée.
ministerial
l'occasion
retreat
de nous
was very
réunir
busy.
afin de
It was an
continuer à
opportunity
développer
to get
notre
together,
approche
to continue to
face à ce
develop our
nouveau monde
approach
dans lequel
to
nous
this
vivons.
new world in which we
Cette
live.
approche,
That
nous la
approach
présenterons en
will be
détail aux
presented
Canadiens la
in
semaine
detail to
prochaine
Canadians
lors
next
du
week
discours du trône.
in the speech
Il
from
faut
the throne.
continuer de soutenir
We
les
must
Canadiens qui
continue
en
to
ont
support
besoin
Canadians who need
durant
that
cette
support
crise.
during this crisis.
La pandémie
The
a
pandemic
accentué plusieurs des inégalités
has
qui existent
highlighted
encore
a
dans
number
notre
of
société.
inequalities that exist within our
Nous devons
society.
saisir
We
l'occasion
must
de cette
seize the
relance
opportunity
économique
of
pour
this
construire un
economic
Canada
restart to
plus sain
build
et
a
plus
healthier
sécuritaire.
and safer
Un
Canada, a
juste
Canada that
et
is
inclusif.
fair
Un
and
Canada
inclusive,
propre
a Canada that
et
is cleaner
compétitif.
and competitive.
On Monday, the COVID-19 Immunity and Vaccine Task Forces provided Cabinet with an update on their important work. Dr. Tam also shared her thoughts on where we are in the fight against this virus and what we need to work on in the coming months. We also heard from Charlene Stewart, the president of the SEIU Healthcare Union, who spoke about the challenges ahead this fall and winter for long-term care, with a particular focus on how we must support those extraordinary workers who keep our elders safe and healthy. Je suis aussi content de
I'm
confirmer
also
que nous
happy to
avons
confirm
accepté la
that we
demande
have
du Québec
accepted
de
Quebec's
prolonger la
request
mission
to
de la
extend
Croix-Rouge
the
canadienne
Red
dans les
Cross mission
CHSLD
in
au
long-term
Québec.
care homes
Nous
in
avons
Quebec.
été présents dès le
We
début
were
avec les
there
forces armées
right at the
canadiennes
beginning with the
et
Canadian Armed
maintenant avec la
Forces, and now
Croix-Rouge.
with the
Et
Red
nous
Cross,
sommes heureux de pouvoir continuer
and we are
à appuyer
happy
nos
to be
aînés.
able to continue to support our elders.
Last weekend, a number of countries in Europe and around the world reported record daily increases of new cases. We're not immune to those trends. Here in Canada, we're seeing cases rise in many parts of the country, too. As everybody knows by now, each new case has the potential to multiply and create even more cases. So we're not out of the woods. This is why I'm asking Canadians to continue to be very careful and follow public health recommendations. Limit the in-person close contacts that you have. Take appropriate precautions to reduce the risk of exposure and keep yourself and your family safe. And make sure you download the COVID Alert app. These efforts help protect our grandparents, our parents, our frontline workers, and vulnerable people in our communities. We have to show solidarity to keep each other safe. We've come too far to give up now. Together, Canadians must stay strong and vigilant. This afternoon, I also want to talk about jobs. Lots of people are back at work, and that's good news. But I know that there are lots more people who are still struggling. And there are many others who are worried that they could lose their jobs in these uncertain times. If that's you, know that your government will continue to be here to support you. This pandemic has highlighted many of the inequalities that still exist in our society. More than ever, we need an economy that benefits all Canadians. During this retreat and over the weeks and months to come, that's exactly what our government will stay focused on. Afin de bâtir un Canada
In order
résilient,
to build
notre
a
économie
resilient
doit
Canada,
être
our
forte
economy
et
must
tous
be
les
strong,
Canadiens
and all
doivent
Canadians
pouvoir en
must be
profiter.
able to benefit
Notre
from it.
pays doit
Our
continuer
country
d'être
must
bien
continue
positionné
to
sur la
be
scène
well positioned
internationale
on the
afin
international
d'attirer
stage
des
in order to
investissements et des
attract
talents de
investments and
partout à
talent
travers le
from
monde.
right around the world.
Pour discuter de ce à quoi il
To
faut s'attendre
discuss
cet automne
what we're
et
going to
de la
expect
place du
this
Canada dans
fall
la
and Canada's
relance
place
économique mondiale
in the
et dans la
global
lutte contre la
recovery and the
COVID-19.
fight against
Nous nous sommes
COVID-19.
entretenus avec
We
l'ambassadeur
had a
Ray,
discussion with Ambassador
Barton
Ray,
et
Ambassador Barton,
l'ambassadrice
and
Hillman.
Ambassador Hillman.
Hier, l'administration
Yesterday,
américaine
the
a
U.S.
reculé dans sa
administration
décision d'imposer
went
des
back on
tarifs
its decision to
injustes sur
impose
l'aluminium canadien.
unfair
C'est une
tariffs on
très bonne
Canadian
nouvelle pour
aluminum.
nos deux
That
pays
is very good
et
news
pour
for
les
both of
travailleurs
our
de
countries
l'aluminium
and
de
for
chez nous.
aluminum workers here
Quand
in
vient le
Canada.
temps de défendre nos
When it comes
travailleurs et nos
time to
intérêts
defend
économiques,
our
que ce soit
workers
pour
and our
l'aluminium ou
economic
pour tout autre
interests,
secteur,
whether it's in the
nous
aluminum
tiendrons
sector or
toujours
elsewhere,
debout.
we will always stand up to
Aluminum
do that.
trade between Canada and the United States has long been good for people on both sides of the border. It supports jobs and it grows our economies. Yesterday's decision by the U.S. administration to remove unjustified tariffs on Canadian aluminum was the right thing to do. I want to thank Minister Freeland, Minister Ng, and Ambassador Hillman for their hard work on this important issue. Our government will always stand up for Canadian workers. Yesterday, I also had a call with Chancellor Merkel of Germany. We talked about the global response to COVID-19, from vaccine plans to our experiences with back to school. We also discussed smart ways to grow our economies going forward in what has become a more unstable world. And we both reiterated our condemnation of the poisoning of Russian opposition figure Alexei Navalny. On the world stage, Canada will continue to work with our G7 allies and other international partners to come up with bold solutions to the challenges we face. And here at home, we will continue to work closely with provinces, territories, municipalities, Indigenous peoples, and businesses to drive the most important economic recovery of our generation. Canadians deserve an ambitious plan for a healthier and safer Canada, a Canada that's fair and inclusive, a Canada that's clean and competitive. And with the speech from the throne on September 23rd, that's exactly what our government is ready to do. Once again, I want to thank you all for joining us today. I'm happy to take your questions now.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre. On va commencer la période de questions avec les journalistes dans la salle pour 10 minutes. Première question.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau, Christian Noël de
Good
Radio-Canada.
afternoon, Mr.
Durant la
Trudeau.
pandémie, quand vous avez
Now,
dépensé des
during the
milliards de dollars
pandemic,
pour
when
aider
you
les
spent
Canadiens,
billions of
l'argent
dollars
allait
to
dans leur
spend
poche, ils étaient
Canadians,
contents.
the money was
Quand on
going
parle
into
de
their
relance
pockets and they were
économique, de
happy.
plan vert,
But when we're
etc., c'est
talking
moins
about a
dirigé
green
vers les gens
plan, it's not
directement.
directed
Ils sont
towards
peut-être
people
moins
as
prêts
much.
à vous
So
donner
maybe
un
they're not
passe-droit.
quite
Donc, ça
as
prend une limite.
anxious to
Est-ce que vous
support
le
you on that.
reconnaissez et quelle est votre
Do you
limite de
understand that there's a
dépenses?
limit to
D'abord,
spending, and what
notre
could it be?
priorité
Well,
demeure
first of all,
garder
our
les Canadiens en
priority is
sécurité.
to
On
continue
peut
to keep
pas
Canadians
parler
safe.
d'une
We
relance
cannot talk
économique
about an
sans
economic economic
des
recovery
Canadiens
without
confiants
having
et en
Canadians
santé.
confident
Et c'est
and
donc
healthy.
la
And
première
therefore,
chose sur
that
laquelle
is the
on
first
s'est
thing
attardé
we
pendant ce
focused on
retrait du Conseil des
during
ministres
this
et qui va être au
cabinet
cœur
retreat, and
de
it will be at the
notre
very
discours du
heart
trône,
of
le
our
fait que
speech from
les
the throne.
Canadiens
The
continuent
fact that
d'être très
Canadians
inquiets par
continue
rapport à
to
la
be very
COVID-19
concerned
et ont
about
besoin
COVID-19
d'appui
and
de leur
therefore need
gouvernement
support
tout de
from their
suite
government
pour
right
passer à
away
travers.
in order to get
Comme
through
on l'a
this.
fait au début de la
As we
pandémie,
did
on
at the
va
beginning of the
continuer d'être là
pandemic,
pour
we will
les gens,
continue to
pour
be there
assurer
for
qu'on
people
puisse
to
passer à
ensure that
travers
we
ensemble,
can
qu'on
get through
puisse
this
être
together
là pour s'appuyer
and
les uns
that
les
we
autres.
can
Évidemment,
support each
on
other.
va
Of
continuer
course,
d'être
we will
responsables,
continue to
mais
behave
d'abord et avant
responsibly,
tout, faut être là
but
pour les
first and
Canadiens pendant
foremost, we
cette
must be
crise.
there for Canadians
question.
during this crisis.
Abigail Beeman, Global News. Prime Minister, on September 2nd, you told Global News that the throne speech would unveil an ambitious green agenda. I'm wondering if anything has changed since then, and if so, why?
I think we recognize, but at the same time as we've been struggling with this pandemic, we've also seen laid visible many different weaknesses within Canadian society, gaps in our social safety net, people who are falling through the cracks, and I think we definitely need to work together to ensure that we are there for one another, because not only does it help us get through this pandemic in better situations, but it's who Canadians are in being there for each other. And as we reflect on how to restart the economy, how to create good jobs for now and into the future, obviously the green sector and newer jobs and innovation and clean tech are going to be an essential part of building back better and building a stronger future. And these are all things we're going to be addressing with the level of ambition that Canadians expect. At the same time, we have to remember, we are not out of this pandemic yet. And the actions we take every single day, not just as a government, but as individual Canadians, matters in how we keep each other safe and how we're able to get our economy going again.
Prime Minister, you keep talking about ambition, but then we've also seen a succession of ministers talk about prudence and everything over the last couple of days over and over, and you're mentioning that as well. But I think Canadians would like to know how much of the agenda and bold ideas that you were elected on will be reflected in the throne speech, and how that fits in terms of ambition, and also what provinces are expecting as well, and how that factors into what they are demanding.
I can understand how impatient Canadians are to hear the throne speech next week. It is going to be an important moment for setting a course for our country that is going to focus on keeping ourselves safe, but also getting through this challenge even better than before. There will be many different elements in it in terms of how we make sure that we're closing some of those gaps in our social safety net and supporting vulnerable Canadians, which we've seen all too clearly through this pandemic. But there's also significant issues about what kind of country we're going to build into the coming years and decades. These are all reflections we're going to have, and as was pointed out, the throne speech that was given 10 months ago or so did not speak about a pandemic, did not recognize the reality we're in, which is why we have an opportunity now to set out a strong direction for the government that will, of course, need to be supported and need to get the approval of Parliament in order to be able to move forward. That's what we're looking forward to, and that's what we're going to keep doing. Okay. Comme j'ai dit,
As I've
nous
said,
allons mettre devant les Canadiens
we
la
will
semaine prochaine
be
un discours du
presenting
trône qui va
Canadians next
présenter
week
notre
with a throne speech
direction en tant que
that will show our
gouvernement pour
direction as a government
les mois à venir,
in
les
the
années à
coming
venir.
months and
Les
the
Canadiens
coming years.
reconnaissent que, y a
Canadians
des failles dans
recognize
notre
that
système
there are
qui,
weaknesses in our
laissent
system
trop de
that
Canadiens
leave
vulnérables
too
ou
many
dépourvus
Canadians
dans une crise
vulnerable
comme ça, et que
in a
nous
crisis
allons
such as
devoir
this, so
adresser.
we will have to
Nous
address
savons
those
aussi
gaps.
qu'une
We also
relance
know
plus propre,
that a
plus verte,
cleaner
va
and
faire
greener
partie des
recovery will be
opportunités
part
que
of
nous
the
avons pour bâtir
opportunities
une
that we
économie
now
plus
have
forte
to build a
et plus
stronger
durable pour
economy,
les
a more
années à
sustainable
venir.
economy for
Alors,
the
je
coming
comprends
years.
l'impatience
So I
des
understand that
Canadiens
Canadians
d'entendre
are
ce discours du
impatient to
trône.
hear that throne
J'ai
speech,
hâte de
and I
pouvoir
myself am
livrer
looking
aux
forward to
Canadiens
be
et
able to
évidemment,
deliver to Canadians.
comme est
And of
important dans une
course,
démocratie,
that's
on
very
va
important in
devoir
a
s'assurer de
democracy,
l'appui du
so we'll have
Parlement
to
pour
ensure we have
aller
the
de
support of
l'avant avec
Parliament
ce plan
to go
pour
forward
un
with this
meilleur
plan
Canada pour
for a
tous.
better Canada for all.
Catherine Lévesque, la presse canadienne. Parlant de l'appui du
Yes,
Parlement,
talking
vous allez
about
rencontrer
support
les
from
chefs des partis
Parliament, you
d'opposition
will
cette
be
semaine.
meeting
N'est-il pas
with
un peu trop tard,
parliamentary
considérant que
leaders
vous
this
voulez
week, but
éviter une
isn't that a
élection? Et
bit
à quel
late
point
since
êtes-vous
you
prêt
want
à
to
faire
avoid
des
an election?
concessions ou écouter leurs
And
idées, là, pour
are
les
you
intégrer
really
dans
going
le
to
discours
be
du
willing to make
Depuis
concessions or
le
listen to
début de
their
cette pandémie,
ideas?
nous avons
Well, since
travaillé
the beginning of
avec
this
tous les
pandemic,
différents
we have been
parlementaires,
working
avec
with
tous les
all
différents partis
parliamentarians
politiques,
and the
y compris
different
les
political
premiers
parties,
ministres des provinces,
including the
pour
premiers of the
répondre
provinces,
aux
in
enjeux
order
qui
to
préoccupaient les
respond
Canadiens
to issues
d'un
of
bout à
concern
l'autre
to
de ce
Canadians
pays.
right across this
Pendant
country.
l'été
During
et
the summer,
depuis, on est
and
toujours
since
en
then,
contact avec
we
les
have
différents
been in
partis
contact with
qui
the different
expriment leurs
parties who have been
préoccupations,
expressing their
leurs
concerns
désirs.
and
J'ai bien hâte
their
de pouvoir
wishes,
m'asseoir
and
avec eux
I'm
aussi
looking
pour
forward to being able
entendre
to
leurs
sit down with
priorités.
them to
Mais
hear about their
nous passons
priorities.
énormément
But
de temps à écouter justement
we
les
are
Canadiens
spending a
dans leurs
lot of time listening to
préoccupations
Canadians,
actuelles
listening
par
to their
rapport
current
à
concerns
la COVID-19
about
et cette
COVID-19
résurgence qu'on est en train
and
de
the
vivre et qu'il faut
resurgence that we're
garder sous
witnessing now,
contrôle,
and the
mais
need
aussi
to
dans
keep
leur
it under
désir de
control,
voir un
but also
avenir
their desire
meilleur pour
for
leurs
a
enfants
better
et leurs
Canada
petits-enfants.
for their
J'ai bien
children
hâte
and
de pouvoir,
grandchildren. And I'm
échanger
looking
avec
forward to an
mes
opportunity
homologues
to
chefs de
talk
parti,
to my
et nous
counterparts in
allons
the other
continuer
parties,
de
and we
travailler
will
ensemble pour les
continue to
Canadiens.
work together for Canadians.
Glenn McGregor, CTV News. Prime Minister, next week when you deliver your throne speech, if the opposition doesn't have confidence in you, they have an obligation to vote accordingly and try and bring down the government. I'm wondering, under the circumstances, do you think it would be reckless or irresponsible for them to do that and trigger a federal election at this point? And also, do you have an obligation yourself, given this unusual circumstance, to consult more than you normally would with the opposition to ensure that they are on side with what you deliver in the throne speech?
First of all, we have been consulting with opposition parties since the very beginning of this pandemic. Canadians expect us to work together, and we've demonstrated, whether it was with the CERB or the wage subsidy or the measures we brought forward for elders, for young people, for a range of businesses, we have worked with opposition parties, and Canadians expect us to continue to. That's why we've engaged with them so far. We've been listening carefully to the things that they've been sharing with Canadians as their priorities, and I look forward to sitting down with all of them, mostly virtually, to hear from them directly on their concerns and preoccupations for the months ahead. In regards to an election, we're in a democracy that has thrived for many, many decades through strong systems, strong institutions that have adapted to local circumstances. We just saw the completion of an electoral process in New Brunswick that went off well. We want to see our democracy continue to thrive, not in spite of difficult circumstances, but also because of difficult circumstances. I know that Canadians want their politicians to be focused on them and their well-being, and I know that all opposition parties want to do a good job of representing Canadians in their views and their concerns, and they will look at the throne speech with that in mind. I think it's a little irresponsible to be talking about recklessness when it comes to elections. I think I should, and we all should, have tremendous confidence in Elections Canada to be able to bring forward strong measures to keep us safe and allow for the expression of the democratic will of the people. I think opposition parties certainly have reflections to take on whether or not they agree with the direction this country is taking, the direction this government is taking of making sure that we have people's back, and we're thinking about the coming years in the responsible way, and I look forward to those debates and discussions.
Good afternoon, Marika Walsh with the Globe and Mail. Prime Minister, your cabinet and Minister Freeland yesterday spoke several times this week about how preventing the spread of the virus is the most important thing for the economy, and how that will then be your cabinet's focus. So how will Canadians measure you by that? What is the goal you're setting for a successful, quote unquote, limiting of the virus? What's the goal in terms of how far this can go, and where do you want to see it kept below in terms of the number of cases this fall?
I think Canadians know that it is really important to control as much as possible the spread of the virus. I think Canadians also know that all governments have their role to play. The federal government has consistently been there to support the provinces in the measures and the challenges they're facing, whether it's $19 billion that we sent to the provinces to help with the safe restart, with money for everything from long-term care facilities to more testing abilities. These are the kinds of things that Canadians are looking to their provincial governments to provide. On top of that, we stepped up with $2 billion directly to the provinces to make sure that our kids can go back to school safely, on top of the plans they'd already established. We're going to continue to work collaboratively, and the reality is nobody knows exactly what's going to happen in the coming weeks and months. I think Canadians are right to look very carefully at what various orders of government are doing and the decisions we take and the way we collaborate together and the way we focus on serving them every step of the way. That's certainly what this government is focused on and what we will continue to do to ensure that every step of the way we are doing as best as we possibly can, keeping Canadians safe and healthy even as we restart the economy carefully.
We'll take one last question on the floor.
Right, Prime Minister, just to respond, in addition to the last question you asked, you answered for Glenn McGregor, it sounds like you would actually welcome an election.
I do not want an election. I don't think Canadians want an election. I think Canadians want politicians to work together, to serve them, to build a better future for them and keep them safe during this COVID crisis. I think it's irresponsible to say that an election would be irresponsible. Our country and our institutions are stronger than that. And if there has to be an election, we'll figure it out. I don't think that's what Canadians want. I don't think that's what opposition parties want. It's certainly not what the government wants. What we want to be able to do is focus 100% on keeping Canadians safe every step of the way, and that's what we're going to do.
I think it's quite clear that Canadians don't want an election, the opposition parties don't want an election, and the government certainly does not want an election. I think it would be irresponsible to say that an election would be irresponsible. We have strong institutions, and they are capable of managing an electoral process in the midst of a crisis, but I think Canadians are right in wanting to see their politicians work together and agree, as we've been able to do in recent months, so that we remain focused on the fight against COVID-19 and the restart of our economy. That's what Canadians expect of us, and the opposition parties will make their own decisions, but I personally am entirely focused on the need to continue to protect Canadians and support Canadians during these tough times and ensure a better future for all Canadians in the coming months and years.
Question au téléphone. Opératrice, c'est à vous.
Thank you, merci. La première question est de Hélène Bizetti du Devoir. À vous la parole. Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau.
Good afternoon, Mr. Trudeau. You said in your opening remarks that you must limit, you want people to limit their in-person close contact. But we have two party leaders right now, Mr. Blanchet and Mr. O'Toole, who are in isolation because of contact with contaminated Canadians. Are you thinking maybe you should change something about the return to Parliament next week? Well, first of all, in various regions of the country, local public health authorities are reflecting right now on what kind of rules should be put in place and how people can stay safer. The situation obviously varies between PEI and Ottawa and Iqaluit, and people will adjust according to their circumstances. But at the same time, we must remain attentive and vigilant at all times. The return of Parliament is important. There are many issues that we need to discuss in order to better serve Canadians, but of course at the same time we will have to do that in a responsible manner. I think it's clear that we cannot have 338 MPs converge in Ottawa to sit in the same room. That would not be responsible. But we have been able to demonstrate in recent months that the hybrid sittings with some people physically there and other people connected by video worked well. The other important aspect to this is that this is a fundamental privilege for MPs to be able to vote in order to represent their constituents. That's why an MP is elected, in order to vote on behalf of the people that he or she represents in the House. And that's why the hybrid and virtual voting voting process will be very important. We saw this when our Bloc colleagues are facing self-isolation. If they have to be there in person to vote. Obviously, they can't and they won't be able to make their voice heard. So in the coming months, there will be situations where people will have to self-isolate because of contact with other people, and we should not be penalizing those people or preventing them from contributing to our democracy. And that's why we will also be working on a remote voting process so that we can move forward as a democracy.
I think, obviously, the situation varies across the country. The situation here in Ottawa is different from the situation in downtown Montreal. It's different from the situation in Charlottetown or Iqaluit. And it's going to be really important that people listen to the local health authorities in the recommendations they have. But everywhere across the country, people need to be careful, people need to be vigilant, people need to be attentive, people need to be listening to the best recommendations of public health, which obviously means having 338 MPs converge on Ottawa from every corner of the country is probably not what we'd want to see from our leadership in this country. So we are going to move forward with a hybrid situation, as worked very well through the spring months, where people are both physically in the chamber and represented through video conference. The challenge that we're also moving forward with is understanding that one of the core elements of our democracy, of the privileges of individual parliamentarians, is to be able to vote for your constituents. And it would be extremely unfair for MPs in more remote sectors or particularly vulnerable sectors to not be able to speak up for their constituents. And that's why we're going to be moving forward with a form of distance voting that will allow every parliamentarian to make sure that their community is heard as we move forward on important measures. We've got interim measures, but we're moving forward on ensuring that our democracy continues to be fully functional in a way that doesn't put MPs, their families, or their communities at risk.
En suivi, Hélène?
Follow-up?
Oui, en fait, j'aimerais
Yes,
changer de sujet, M.
I'd like to
Trudeau.
change
Beaucoup de
topics, Mr.
Québécois
Trudeau.
réclament depuis
A lot
longtemps
of
que la loi
Quebecers have
101
long
soit
been
étendue pour
asking
qu'elle
that
s'applique aussi aux
Bill
entreprises et
101 be
juridictions
extended
fédérales pour les
to
banques et
federally
compagnies aériennes.
regulated institutions such as banks. The Bloc believes that, the NDP, and now Aaron O'Toole and the Conservative Party think it's a good idea. I'd like to know what your position is on this. Do you agree? Considering that the three opposition parties together represent more votes in the House than you have, and they could impose this on you. As you know, the Liberal Party of Canada will always be there to protect the French language. And these days, our priority is to protect individuals, Canadians, people who are afraid of catching COVID-19, and that's what we're focusing now on as a party and as a government.
Prochaine question au téléphone.
Merci. La prochaine question est de Raymond Fillon de TVA. À vous la parole.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Trudeau. Again, you're saying quite categorically that you don't want an election. So if that's the case, can you ensure us that you will get the support of at least one opposition party for your throne speech? Well, one of my priorities is to do what we have to do to help Canadians, to support them and keep them safe in the midst of this pandemic, and show them that we're reflecting on the coming months and years. That's our priority. I know that the different opposition parties are also listening carefully to what Canadians have been saying, and they're certainly saying the same thing. And we want to present an ambitious and responsible plan to protect Canadians and build a better future. Of course, as we've been doing from the outset, we will be open to their suggestions, to their recommendations, to better serve Canadians, and I'm confident that with the plan that we will be putting forward, Canadians will feel that they are well protected by their government. But it's up to the opposition parties to decide whether they wish to support us or not. Follow up. With respect to the border, can you confirm that the border will continue to be closed after September 21st? What do you say to the snowbirds as well? Will they be able to fly south this year? Well, as we do every month, we continue to engage on this and to talk to the U.S. government about the border. We don't have any announcement to make on that today, but the discussions are continuing. And at every step of the way, my priority and the priority of this government is to ensure that Canadians are safe, and it's based on that we will always be basing our decisions. Now, we know that many Canadians go south in the winter, and they will have to reflect on the situation in the United States with COVID-19. Obviously, anyone leaving Canada will have to self-isolate upon their return, but again, our priority is to protect Canadians by keeping the borders closed.
Merci. Opératrice, dernière question au téléphone.
Merci. Thank you. Our next question is from Bill Curry from the Globe and Mail. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I wanted to ask you, in your December throne speech, your government promised to act on pharmacare, and there's been some rumblings that something similar might be coming this time. So where is your government at in terms of delivering on the pharmacare promise that you made in the election and in your last throne speech?
Obviously, we will have lots to say about the priorities of this government and the continued priorities of this government in our upcoming throne speech a week from now. But what I can highlight is, obviously, the world has changed in many ways over the past number of months with this COVID crisis, which requires us to set forward a new throne speech, which is what we're going to be doing. But at the same time, our concern for the most vulnerable, our desire to support Canadians who need an extra hand, our desire to make sure that Canadians are safe and healthy, not only continue, but are even more reinforced than ever before. So I look forward to engaging with Canadians on the priorities we will be laying out in the coming week.
Following up, Bill?
As you know, throne speeches are usually very high-level documents, so should we expect a fall update or even a budget? There hasn't been a budget this year that will come shortly after that will provide more details about some of the things you've been talking about today.
Of course, our finance minister is working very, very hard on making sure that we can continue to demonstrate the kind of ambition and responsibility that has always characterized Liberal governments. We will be responsible about the investments we make, both to help keep Canadians safe right now and make sure we're building back better into the future. But I can also highlight that along with the throne speech, our government has gotten into the practice of releasing mandate letters that give a much more detailed look at the kinds of things that we're expecting our government to deliver on and our ministers to work on, and that will certainly be part of the coming weeks as well.
Merci beaucoup. C'est ce qui m'a fait la conférence de presse aujourd'hui.
Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Bonne journée.
Les habla Óscar Avendaño de Exploring Solutions Canada. Quiero compartir con ustedes que hemos incluido un nuevo servicio para ti: financiamiento de vehículos nuevos y usados. Sí, escuchaste bien. Enfocados en ti, nuevos inmigrantes, estudiantes internacionales o cualquier residente ya establecido con o sin crédito. Toda situación migratoria será atendido. Por favor, llámanos al 905-920-2143 y comienza a conducir tu carro ahora.